Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Cutie Art Crusaders for March 4th, 2014. My name is Rainbow Plasma. I'm the organizer and this week's editor, and today I'm joined by...
Burn to One, the special guest coordinator.
I'm Flutterguy317. I am the media manager.
And I'm Atmos Spark. I do the questions and stuff. I'm back. Yay.
Yay!
Hooray.
Yay! You lost your voice last weekend.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody almost missed me.
Well, you were back for the spoiler cast, so they
Yeah.
Yeah. They only had...
It was like you were never gone.
Speaking of being back, it's funny because it's been almost like a week now, so I've almost not forgotten about it, but it's old news to me. But based on, since last week, I'm obviously back in Canada. Shortly after I recorded the podcast on Friday and the spoiler cast on Saturday, I drove back on Sunday. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, I don't really like talking about the trip while I'm there, but it's nice that I can talk about it now, kind of, now that I'm back. So yeah, I had a fun, relaxing time during my week off at Flutterguy's place, so thanks again for having me, bud.
No problem. I just, while you were talking about that, I had this mental image of you, heading home to Canada, riding a moose with a Canadian flag and, maple syrup and, just, really epic style.
Well, it was actually, the border was super easy because the Canada versus Sweden gold medal hockey game was on early in the morning, which, of course, I got up for.
Yeah.
And we won. Woo!
Yay.
But the border was super quick, and when I got there, the person in the booth who was I don't know if they're Canadian or American, but they had a sports recap of the day, and they were showing the gold medal game, and I kind of chatted them up about it. So that was
nice.
It was pretty Canadian. Going back was pretty Canadian.
How to get into Canada.
Just talk about hockey.
Who won the hockey game today? Oh, but there were so many. That's the right answer.
You passed. Go ahead.
You have to add an A in there at the end.
It's funny that we're mentioning hockey because this week's episode is 87. 87's the number of a very good hockey player, Sidney Crosby. No one else will care about that. I thought it was a funny coincidence. Let's move on.
I
had no
know
idea.
that name, actually. It's weird. I don't follow hockey at all, but I know that name.
I've already forgotten his name.
Captain of Team Canada.
Yeah. So yeah, you're back in Canada. I still have my mouse that so yeah, last night Rainbow Plasma has kind of gotten me into playing Hearthstone, which is a new game
Damn right.
from Blizzard, and it's amazing. And we were playing it last night, and all of a sudden I heard the jangling of keys downstairs, and I live alone, so that was kind of freaky. And turns out I have a mouse that I need to capture now. So he scared the living daylights out of me, though.
Yeah. There's someone in your house.
I know.
He's messing with your keys.
Well, because I had made crepes, and to make crepes, I whisk flour with a fork, and then I'll put it into a bowl that I had used to melt butter, and apparently the mouse got into the bowl
Had a grand old time.
Yeah, because there was
rolling around
residue of butter, and apparently somehow my fork ended up halfway across my countertop. So
That's a big mouse.
yeah, I don't really know what he was doing.
I'm taking this with me.
At least they didn't take it as a weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna wake up in the middle of the night, have a fork in your face.
Just a mouse with a fork. Yeah, so that kind of scared me yesterday, but I'm back. I'm better now.
And also, speaking of stuff that happened while I was at your place, so one of the activities that we did together was watching Twitch plays Pokemon. While we were there, kind of watching that whole thing unfold. So for people who weren't aware, which is surprising to me, there was this new Twitch channel that came up that basically was playing the old Pokemon games, Pokemon Red, I believe.
Yeah.
Either red or blue. And basically you could type a command into the chat and the game would register it and do it. which sounds great, except for the fact that there's 100,000 people doing it at once. So it's kind of random.
Mhm.
And today, I guess early this morning on the Friday, March the 1st, they actually beat the game.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Saturday. What am I
March the
talking about?
1st.
Saturday, March the 1st.
Yeah.
They actually beat the game.
Yeah.
So now they're going to be starting a new game. That's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
as a gaming enthusiast, it was really cool to see the fact that they actually beat the game just by perseverance.
Yeah. And it took a lot. It was a lot quicker than I had originally thought it would be. Because like you were explaining, I lived a sad childhood and never played Pokemon.
Right.
But you were explaining like how they have to beat the final bosses and stuff, and it was like, oh well, that's not gonna happen for a long time.
Well, it wasn't the final bosses that was hard. It was getting to them.
Yeah.
The second they got to them, they'd won the game.
Yeah.
Because that's just a grind. So as long as they could get one Pokemon, they'd be able to get. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. So that was something, and I know a lot of our fans have watched it as well,
Mhm.
and a lot of people in general have watched it. So that's a cool thing. There should be some sort of pony version of that.
Hey, what, like a Twitch plays what are those games on the
Fighting is
hub?
magic.
Oh, hey now.
Hey.
That doesn't exist. I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
careful, we'll get a C&D.
Also, if you hear a dog barking in the background, I've got new neighbors. They have a dog. It barks.
As they usually do.
Well, if you hear jingling of a collar, that's my dog moving positions because he's sleeping.
If you hear jingling of keys, that's my mouse. And
if you hear Flutter Guy talk, it means he's going to transition to the art.
And if you hear snoring, that's just Atmo.
Well, I'm not snoring.
Oh.
Snoring at all.
So,
Go eat an apple, Burn. Hey, Burn. Why don't you type some notes on your keyboard that nobody can hear ever?
Wow.
Don't make fun of my keyboard.
anyhow, all right. So this week's theme is bright freaking colors, apparently.
Yay.
It's saturation. That's the technical term.
Well, not according to what Byrne put on his on the stream.
yeah.
It was
Well,
bright freaking colors with like what 8 E's.
we don't always follow Burns' lead.
So that means basically like heavy saturation and use of really bright colors, but good use of really bright colors.
I didn't want the color theme to be specifically just saturation. I want it to be like super bright, active, like interactive is the wrong word. But just like really bright colors used well.
Yeah.
Or it's like their qualities, which is usually having an extremely high saturation, and just like the qualities of those colors. But I don't know.
So I mean,
That was kind of like my goal.
the best way to explain it is just to show some of the art. So let's jump in right to the first 2 pieces, which we're going to show
Whoa!
side by side. I know.
2.
Whoa, big change
Wow,
there.
ridiculous. There's cannon. Drop the force.
So instead of showing the piece and the piece with just the value, because that wouldn't really work with pieces that focus on color, we're going to show you 2
Everything
pieces.
would be great.
Yeah. We're going to show you 2 pieces because they're by the same artist, the lovely Iopichio.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oi Picho.
The first piece is
It's
called
definitely not Oi.
Iopichio. No, Iopichio. The first piece is called The Stars Will Aid in Her Escape, and the second piece is just called Awesome, because it is. So the first piece, The Stars Will Aid in Her Escape, shows Twilight looking up at the moon, as pictured in season 1, episode 1, when she's in the library looking up at the moon with Nightmare Moon.
Yes.
And the second piece is Rainbow Dash flying, looking oh so awesome.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah. Well, I mean, they're both interesting in their own way. I don't know. I feel kind of out of depth in this episode because, as I've described to Burns, saturation is something that I don't have a lot of leeway with. I'm not a really big fan of it. And even though I can understand the intrinsic value of, having these higher saturations and they do have artistic value, it's still difficult with some of the more saturated stuff because it does make me I don't know what the right word
Scratch
is,
your
but
eyes out.
it's not as eye pleasing to me. And I really focus on the eye pleasing as opposed to the artistic endeavor in pleasing.
See, before you begin, Burned, I just wanted to say that, like,
I'll just sit here.
I really enjoy these kind of pieces because I do find them interesting. Like, I do understand where you're coming from, Rainbow Plasma, because it's not your typical eye-pleasing color blends and value shading and stuff like that. But, like, I really enjoy pieces by, for instance, My Magic Dream, where there's, like, these bright highlights of really saturated art and stuff like that. And if it's done well, like Iopichio does, I don't know. It's something about the blending. Like, I don't know the technical aspects of it, and I'm sure Bernd, you can fill us in with that. But something about these two pieces just really speaks to me, especially the first one.
I agree with
Stars.
Apple Guy here. He's like I'm gonna call you Apple Guy. I think when it hurts, like I completely agree. Like I also really like the pieces like this that are really highly saturated with a whole bunch of colors. What really starts to hurt is when you've got really bright colors contrasting with really not so bright colors. Like you've got the neon green on black or the neon red on black, that sort of thing. That hurts. But when you've got this sort of thing here, like, yeah, the Rainbow Dash one kind of hurts, the Awesome one kind of hurts, but the whole thing is bright. But it doesn't hurt as much as it would be just that bright yellow on black. Because you don't have that sort of color burning into your retinas.
So speaking of Burn, Burn, do you want to take it away? What's going on here?
Before I talk about what's, like, I feel is going on, that point Pinky Dash just made, like, that contrast of super bright next to not super bright, is a good point, but there's also, like, the contrast to that point about contrast is that if you have specific, like, extremely bright saturated colors next to other specific colors, like, how they, like, interact with each other when they're, like, specifically put next to each other, and how they interact in contrast with each other can actually create, like, just a blinding effect, equally as blinding effect as if you were to put them next to, like, their value contrast,
like yellow and blue.
Yeah, yellow and blue or whatever. Like, it just specific colors, whether they're complements or anything, just, like, if especially if they're really different colors, how they just, like, bounce off each other can really just, like, mess with your mind and your eyes. There's some really great pieces actually in the art museum here in Portland that it's basically like they're just, like, 10, 20 foot tall, like, sheets of, like, whatever cloth stuff that is that artists have, like, soaked specific pigments into to be ridiculously blindingly bright. And it's just to show, like, their interactions of color, blah blah blah. Anyway, the reason why I really enjoy these two pieces and, like, wanted to feature them is because how the colors are used, and how the artist, specifically Iopichio, uses these really bright colors, which in most terms, or how, like, I don't know, normally when you'd see them, like, colors that are this bright just look awful. Does that make sense? Like, you normally wouldn't see colors this bright put into a piece that that even anyone or most people could enjoy. I don't know. It's the creative use of how this artist specifically blends different colors into lots of completely different colors that I find really enjoyable. Because to an extent, when I look at pieces like this, it's not so much that I'm looking at, something that's kind of like something soft or plain. How do I word that? I'm not looking for, like, a visually, like, simple piece or something. I'm looking for something that's really visually interesting, and that's what I find with, like, an episode like this or with pieces like this, that I really enjoy seeing the interactions of color for notions of, like, how cool I think it is or nerdy effects or whatever. So I don't know. It's more the interaction of these crazy colors that's used in basically crazily colored pieces.
Well, it's interesting because in the show everything is very dull, very not saturated, and if you're starting out as an artist, you kind of learn that don't color your ponies really saturated and bright because that's not how the show does it. But I don't know. It's something that's interesting because you don't really see it that often in the natural world, but colors do interact in certain ways, and, like, it's not just the blending of colors, but, like, putting different colors side by side or kind of like overlapping certain colors, and I don't know, it's there's something appealing about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I really like that contrast too to like really, pastel ponies that we're used to, and then have something that's just blinding like this, because it is that kind of contrast of what we're used to. It's what like what we're used to seeing in ponies, like that pastel, like normal, like very simple, pleasing color scheme, and then just saying like forget that, throwing it out the window. And going something with like just crazy over the top colors like this, and where it's like you're just using and relying on this crazy interactions of color. In fact, like this episode is almost basically an interaction of really bright colors episode more than it is anything.
well, it's also interesting because these artists that, or at least this artist, doesn't really use a change in value at all in his pieces. So it's basically entirely reliant on color and change in color to kind of define features, I think, right? More or less, maybe.
Yeah, pretty much actually.
I mean, Io uses line art and stuff, so there is kind of a separation, so you get like a sketchiness to it. But to kind of shade and define features and stuff like that, it's all colors, which is...
Yeah, it's shifts in colors. Like there's definitely some like shifts in value of colors, but it's kind of the quality of that color more than the artist is using, actually like shifting the value darker. Like on the Twilight piece, there's definitely a lot of shifts in value, but if we move over to the Rainbow Dash piece, like it's all one value really. Like in the top right corner, there's some more muted colors, but pretty much everything else is just, it's a bright, pure quality of that color, and just blend that in with other crazy colors.
Yeah. So something I wanted to bring up about this first piece, The Stars Will Aid in Her Escape, is that it is based on a PMV by the same name that is done of the song Cosmic Love by Florence and the Machine, which is an amazing PMV, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. It would be probably my favorite PMV. So
yeah, I love the moon reflection and how her eyes are showing through the hair. And also just her specific like hair, like right on top of her head and eyes. Like look at those colors specifically, like how the artist uses that like weird violet blue rainbow on the bottom part of Twilight's hair, and also that really bright turquoise in the bottom of her eyes. Like where would you ever see colors like that on anything? And this artist somehow is like, you know what, I'm gonna make that eye. Like what goes through this artist's mind specifically, where it's like, I'm gonna make this bright cyan the bottom of Twilight's eyes. So it's just how this artist even thinks of using specific color choices. It's like you're crazy.
I do love
awesome.
how creative people are when they come up with like these random color schemes and they look fantastic.
Yeah.
No.
And it's definitely a talent, because you can see a lot of like novice artists or artists who are starting out who try to use more saturated colors, and it doesn't really turn out to be the best. But you definitely have to be a really good colorist to kind of know what colors go well next to other colors and what colors to blend in together and stuff.
Definitely. Also really love the little bottom part of her hair. What do you call it? Like not her bangs, but that other little part of her mane below her chin.
Yeah.
Like you have blue, cyan, red, violet, and yellow in the middle.
Yeah.
Like what the heck?
It's a full color wheel right there. Almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the Rainbow Dash piece, just really quickly, like there is pretty much every single color. Although
Rainbow.
Yeah, it's a rainbow piece. So, and it like the Stars Will Aid in Her Escape, that piece. There are some really vivid saturated colors and stuff. But I mean, in Awesome, it's just really, really bright.
Yeah. Look at the background too in Awesome. Where the artist is like hinting at clouds and hinting at the sun, and it's a lot of the work there is done in color more than it is in how they're actually shown.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on to our next piece, which you might want to put your sunglasses on for. This is Color Magic X by Mewball, and this is a piece of Twilight with an insanely saturated everything except for her body. Well, even her body, because it's saturated white. So, Yeah, this.
The body on my monitor is saturated pink.
What?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
my monitor is probably not calibrated.
yeah, I
Correctly.
can see there's a
Definitely
bit of pink. I
a
can
bright
see.
pink.
Yeah.
If you click on download, like the download, it'll bring up the image surrounded by white, and then you can notice that little hue shift
Yeah, it's definitely pink.
if your monitor is calibrated.
Oh yeah,
It's-
yeah,
it's like-
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, extremely bright value of pink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But earlier when I was trying to formulate the correct intelligent words for interactions of crazy colors, this was a piece I really wanted to feature because it's the interactions of crazy saturated colors and how like them juxtaposed or placed next to each other to create just crazy mind-boggling effects almost. So this was really one of those like interactions of really bright colors that I wanted to like feature, put on the screen just to like show what other like really saturated colors can do next to each other. So like every like wherever my eye goes in this piece, it's placed on a different interaction of colors. So like some of my favorite places are like her tongue and eyes, like that cyan next to the yellow. And then her like the shading in her neck where you have like these blue lines and then yellow like striped lines really quickly, like that hatched there. So it's like that really bright yellow next to that really bright pink. It does basically these crazy things and creates these really interesting interactions. And then that yellow in the background, like having the red inside of it, also creates a completely different feel. And I don't know, it's just it's crazy and it's super cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of like what I was saying in the last one with the crazy color schemes that people come up with, and it makes it look incredible. Because this is just.
And it's one of those things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, well,
I was gonna.
no,
You
go.
finish it.
I'll
Emma
finish it.
Spark, you go. Emma Spark, go.
Okay. No, I've lost it now.
Burned, go.
Dang it. Sorry, you don't talk enough. And I wasn't used to
You don't shut up
making
enough.
more than 2 sentences.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
All right. Well, I'm gonna talk more. Now I forgot what I was gonna say.
So big bright colors. Yeah, no, like what you were saying, Atmos Spark, the Mewball definitely was able to choose the right colors to use in this piece for the color scheme, and like, yeah,
Okay,
it
yeah.
does kind of like get at you a little bit, and I know Rainbow Plasma kind of may have wandered away because of the whole colors, but he's back now. But yeah, it's, you know, once you get over the initial shock value, like there's a really, really well done piece of art here.
Okay, that's now I remember what I was gonna say. I was gonna say it wasn't one of those things where a piece like this is supposed to be like visually pleasing or like pleasing to the eye. It's supposed to be about its craziness and about the interactions of colors. And I also like to point out that it's a piece. This piece is created in CMYK, cyan, magenta, and what's the other one I'm
Yellow.
forgetting? Yellow
And black.
So thank you. And then K is black. Yeah. So cyan, magenta, yellow, and black.
Ah.
CMYK. Yes. So you have like black and Twilight's eyes, and then everything else is some kind of crazy cyan, some kind of crazy yellow, or some kind of crazy magenta. Like, and it's those colors interacting with each other and being put on top of each other. It's actually creating some of these crazy effects, and I actually didn't notice that before, and I just picked up on it now. So like those are traditional like ink pigment colors, and it's subtractive, meaning that the more colors you add, the more it becomes closer to black.
Mm-hmm.
The more black it becomes, the more colors you have, blah, blah, blah. Where RGB, the opposite, is additive.
Well, if you think about like a monitor, a computer monitor, you start out with black and you're creating light, you're projecting light. Whereas with a piece of paper or printed material, you start out with white and you're trying to get to black. So it's a different process with both of those. With monitor, it's RGB, and with printed, it's usually CMYK.
What's super interesting is like it's actually colors interacting and blending in a subtractive color wheel. So like the best place where you can see this is in the bottom, actually, with the Mewball signature, where he has a blue ink or cyan writing over yellow, creating green. So it's that CMYK like color interaction, where in RGB it would work differently, I believe.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. I'm not positive. But anyway. Something else. When I was talking about how a piece like this is more about just the crazy interactions of color, also want maybe like our viewers to note that depending on where you look at specific colors changes, even though it's the same exact color, where you're looking at that color changes the interaction or the how you see that color, like what type of color almost. So like I feel like the yellow in the top right with like the red stars in it and like blue around, or like dark blue and magenta around it, it feels like a completely different area of color and different temperature of color than say the yellow in her tongue. Like I feel like when I look at that, it looks much cooler in comparison to like other yellows.
Mm-hmm.
So like in other magentas in her hair, like the pink in the top of her hair next to the blue feels much more pink than say the pink in her tail when like next to that blue, even though they're exactly the same color, like exactly the same color picked out of the palette.
Yeah.
So they look different and they feel different, but yet they're still exactly the same.
Yeah. What's interesting, because in like the hatching that you mentioned, it looks like they're kind of softer colors, but in reality, I don't think they are. I think it's just because they're in this like pink versus next to blues and more deeper pinks and reds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like it's really interesting, like how colors interact with the colors around them.
Yes.
I don't understand it at all, but but it's interesting.
Yeah, right. Neither do I. I just pretend like I do.
And we just blindly follow you.
Yes, followers. Just like Otaku AP and Dave. Yes, dance.
I mean, a piece like this, there is a really, really big technical aspect to it, but I kind of feel like it's also about the whole raw emotions of it. Just because it is so crazy and it's meant to bring out that crazy, and it's like, it's supposed to, I guess, portray Twilight just being crazy. I mean, even the expression and her tongue sticking out and her hair is going wild and stuff. Like,
I love it.
Yeah. It's like when you have a cartoon, if it like, or like in a comic book or whatever, they like, you know, it's something different for the emotions or the actions and stuff like that.
I would love to read a comic book that's illustrated with colors like this.
Oh my god, Mewball, make
Dear
make a
Lord.
comic book, please. Mewball, please. Yeah.
It's more about the experience and how like these colors interact, you know? Like this, as this piece is like standing alone. So it's like, you don't look at it to be kind of like, it's that complete opposite of what we're used to. You're not looking at it for like something to kind of like, I don't know, be simple and enjoyable. It's like, it's because you can't create a feeling like this piece creates with, you know, pastel colors and simple colors. There's just no way.
I was just gonna say, on top of all of this, it looks like Mewball had fun making this.
Yeah.
Mewball always looks like he has fun making anything. But yeah, this piece just looks like it's packed with fun. Like, you remember that Lyra one?
Yes.
The Lyra music one that Mewball made?
Yeah.
Like, that one was crazy fun too.
Yeah, that one.
Just like the quick stars in the background and all like the hatching is just like
Yeah,
So
I
he just
was looking through
vomited fun.
I was looking through his gallery, and those two kind of are very similar. Not terribly similar, but yeah. All right, so our next piece is called MLP Friendship is Vivid by Kelsey Chan. Yeah, these colors seem a bit more subdued, but maybe that's just because I've been staring at the Mewball piece for too long.
No, that definitely struck me when I first saw this one. It's still those really, really bright, saturated colors absolutely everywhere in this thing, but it does look like it's muted a bit. So whether Kelsey, I'm assuming is female, whether she's like put a like an overlay over top of it, which just mutes all the colors at once, or they've done it so that it's saturated but sort of, and I guess washed out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It does look muted. It doesn't like jab into you as much as it probably could.
No, you're totally right. I wouldn't say there's a filter over it, but the artist definitely used like more desaturated colors as it fades back. So we still have the presence of super saturated colors like in the foreground. So like that puddle Pinkie Pie splashing it. Like that yellow is the same value of yellow we just looked at in the Mewball piece, and same with the red and like the magenta or pink on the left-hand side. But then the pink that Pinkie Pie is actually like, it's a similar pink to what Twilight was in the last piece. And then as you go like keep stepping back in the background, colors kind of get a little bit more softer, a little bit more pastel, but there's still enough like really bright saturated colors in just certain areas of the piece to create those really interesting interactions of colors that I was looking for. Because some colors on the left, like the cyan above the green, is still extremely saturated, but it's the quality of color more than it's the saturation of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so it's been 20 minutes since I said anything. I wanted to see how long it could go without people making a comment about it. It seemed to go pretty well so far. But I think when it comes to saturation and stuff, I don't find appeal in necessarily the more quote unquote intellectual side of art. I think it's interesting to research, and we definitely talk about a lot of things that go beyond what we see in a piece, and I think it's important. But as I mentioned near the beginning of the podcast, I just think in theory it's important, but in practice it's not something that really grabs me. The first pieces that we've featured so far, I'm going to be honest, don't really move me that much, because I, as a person who considers himself a little bit more casual about viewing art, it's hard for me to kind of look past the fact that it is, in a way, supposed to be visually unappealing, and so that that kind of puts me off a little bit, which is fine because everyone has their own preferences for it. But then we get to stuff like this, which is saturated in its own right and is using kind of irregular versions of these colors, but is definitely more visual pleasing to me, at least. And so something like this is easier for me to look at and analyze saturation compared to like the last piece, which I had zero to say because I didn't really have any, like I said, it's very hard for me, and I imagine there's other people like there out there who feel the same way, where it's hard to get past it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting point though too, because it's probably not an equal amount, but there's still plenty of people out there who hold like the opposite mindset, where it's like they really attach to something ridiculously bright and vivid like that because, I don't know, they enjoy it for whatever reason that is their own.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because like I don't go out of my way to find like crazy saturated color pieces because I get some kind of intellectual kick out of them. It's just because I see them like, wow, like that's cool. It hits me and it's enjoyable even for like a simple factor.
Well, I didn't necessarily mean to say it like it's some sort of intellectual thing. What I meant by that was it was kind of there's a value in those pieces past what we see, and in pieces like these other ones with a huge amount of saturation, there's more weight on kind of past what we see, or at least in the context of what we see, as opposed to just being purely visually pleasing. And it's a preference that different people might have.
Yeah.
So we tried to include a variety of preferences in this episode. The first ones are a little bit more skewed towards that aspect of push the boundaries.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas these ones, I believe, are kind of like a blend between pushing these boundaries and using irregular colors, and also making a more traditional visually appealing piece. I mean, that some of that comes down to the line art as well, just the way that artists make ponies, and Kelsey Chan does a fantastic job of making quite cute little ponies, for sure.
Definitely the narrative too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great narrative here. I mean, they're all doing their own thing, and they're showing off their personalities well, I think,
Absolutely.
even in the subtle things. I mean, we've got the more obvious ones. We've got, like the Pinkie Pie and the Fluttershy, I think are kind of obvious ones. But I mean, and Spike is really obvious as well, and Rarity is really obvious. But then there's other stuff, like there's Rainbow Dash, and there's Twilight being she's investigating something.
Inquisitive as per usual.
Yeah, and Applejack is kind of calm and relaxed, and I think that's a lesser known side of her personality. So, it's there's a lot of emotional research done in these ones. Not to say there isn't in the other ones, but it's more tied to the characters, I guess, and more tied to a scene, and that's another aspect of art too, right? There's some art that is meant to stand alone and focus on characters or something by itself, and then there's these kind of art pieces that focus more on a scene, which is interesting to kind of think about. And I guess we'll have to go over that in a different episode.
Yeah, it'd be really fun to go over, like, not abstract art, but just abstraction, where you
Almost
look
like
at a
portraits
piece.
in a way.
Well, yeah, but there's also the concept in art where there's an art piece that is it's the qualities for it as a thing and what it does, not what it is. So the complete opposite of what we're looking at here, like things, ponies that are creating a scene and a narrative, like the complete opposite, where if there was nothing intelligible at all and it was just huge blotches of colors, and it was technically not at all a thing other than a bunch of just colors that we see on our monitor, and we talk about the interactions of that as it is. And like that's the complete and utter like opposite. And we'll also never do it because it's not about ponies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I mean, even if it's pony colors. Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
while this might be a more traditional scene per se, it still definitely pushes these boundaries. And I think an important thing to talk about when we're talking about saturation is saturation isn't necessarily extreme brights. It's just the fact that it's infused with an incredible amount of color. And so even things that you might look in this piece, like Pinkie Pie's like coat, you know, it's pink, but it's a very saturated light pink, you know? We can see that the colorful rainbow water that she's splashing in is crazy saturated, but not a lot of people step back and consider the fact that most of their coats are also quite saturated too. They're just not also like super bright and in your face.
Yeah.
So this piece just takes saturation and it kind of implements it into almost everything, which is really interesting.
That's why I'm glad we got to feature this one, because the ones before, like, they were pure, like, 100% saturation in Photoshop. And in this piece, like, just the foreground, like the yellow little puddle thing, and that Pinkie Pie is splashing in, is like that 100% saturation. But as you step back, the artist is upping the lightness. Like, there's more white in those colors. Obviously, most prevalent is the background behind Fluttershy, and actually Fluttershy herself, where it is now a more like muted pastel dull colors with like larger amounts of white in it. But I'm really glad we got to feature this piece because it's still about these interactions of color, and it's all these colors that are still extremely vivid, to use like the term that the artist is using in the title, and like them placed next to each other. And they're still like really bright saturated colors, and it's just this entire piece that's basically throwing value almost out the window, with the exception that colors are getting a little bit lighter as you step back. And it's just about these crazy uses of colors, whether it's the gradient in the hill, like gradients in the hills, or the like rainbow gradient in the background, and then like the colors in the characters and line work themselves, you know?
To me, it sort of feels like, I guess the word I was trying to think of earlier was like soft. They're sort of like, it's sort of a softer colors, whereas you look at the last two that we featured, plus, or last three, sorry, that we featured, and the next one that we've got, they're all really sharp, like they sort of cut into each other, whereas this one, even though they don't actually blend, they look like they do. Like, everything looks like it's soft.
All right, so just a few more things that I wanted to talk about before we move on to the next piece, which we kind of do because we're kind of running low on time. But just one thing that I wanted to say, because we are comparing this piece to the previous three pieces, is that because it is a full scene, and because the colors are, I guess, more desaturated in the background. That's not really a good word to use, because the colors are very saturated throughout. But I don't know, it does look a little bit more pleasing to the eye than the others. But I don't know, it's just comparatively, yeah. But it's kind of weird because because it is part of a scene, you don't really realize how saturated the colors are. Like, for instance, the grass in the background, there's this bright cyan, really saturated cyan to the left of Pinkie Pie's tail, and you don't really notice that until you like look at it, and you're like, yeah, that is really saturated. But just taking a glance at it, it just looks like it's a continuation of the really saturated green on the other side. So yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. It's two different ways to use really saturated colors, and both of them do a fantastic job. So
Hey Rainbow Plasma,
what's up?
you should make this piece black and white so we can see what it looks like when there's no color.
Now you want to see it black and white. Oh, okay, Burned. Why don't I make it black and white for you? There you go. Mister
Thanks.
complains about me making it black. Well, actually, no, you don't complain about it, so that's fair.
No, I like it when you do that. When have I ever complained?
You just don't do it yourself
No.
because you're lazy.
I do it when it matters.
Well, now I'm going to put it upside down. Look.
Zoom in.
Now it's a completely different piece. Oh my goodness.
How dare you?
All right, it's
This
back.
is anarchy.
Wait, upside down, backwards, not saturated. Saturated. Saturation's to 1,000%.
A, B.
You should
start
desaturate
nine.
it, turn it upside
Start-
down, and then call
start
it your
nine.
own.
All right.
Up, down.
Move on to next piece.
All right. So our last piece for today is called MLP Bring Back the Magic, again by Kelsey Chan. So it's kind of weird because same artist, two pieces, but this is a completely different style than the last piece.
Well,
Not
completely is a very strong word.
Well, I mean, there's a lot that's different about it. For instance, the previous piece, there was a lot of line work that you saw. In this piece, not so much line work. In fact, no line work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still got the use of these really saturated colors, but again, like the previous piece, it doesn't look as saturated as our first three pieces. I guess washed out would be kind of the way to put it. But
I would disagree with washed out. I think an important thing when we're talking about saturation is a lot of people associate saturation and high saturation with bright colors, like we saw with Mute Ball's piece. And I don't necessarily think that's true because you can get some really you get really deep saturated colors and it's still very saturated.
Right.
And we see a lot of that here. When you look at the on the ponies right now, to simplify it down, there's two colors on them. There's their regular color, which is their kind of like, Rainbow Dash's blue and Applejack's orange and stuff like that. And then there's kind of like their shadow color, which is just a darker version of that. The shadow is very saturated, but it's still dark. So like Twilight Shadow is like a darker purple. It's incredibly saturated, like fully saturated.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily bright. So, I want to separate this idea that saturation equals brightness because in reality, they're two different things. In fact, they're completely two different things. It just so happens that a lot of times when we talk about saturation and bad saturation, quote unquote, that it also happens to come with a lot of like brightness as well.
Yeah. Well, because when you're working in an art program, generally there's different color, not really wheels, but color modes that you can work in. And one of them is HSL or HSV, or sometimes HSB, which is hue, saturation, and value, lightness, or brightness.
Which are all the same thing.
Which are
Or
basically all the
chroma.
same thing, yeah. So,
HSC is not a thing. It's not a very common thing.
yeah. So I mean, it's very separate. Saturation is very separated from value, and value is where you get the brightness factor, and saturation is where you get the color depth, I guess. Depth isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Basically, the color saturation. It's
The amount of color.
recursiveness. Yeah.
I guess in a way you could say the amount of hue.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope.
Well,
nope.
no,
Can't do that.
Yeah, hue's not the right word.
Hue is
Because-
the area on the color wheel.
Yeah.
It is what kind or type of color. So careful.
I was trying to relate it back to HSL standards.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work because hue talks about where on the color wheel it is.
Yes.
Not yeah.
Yeah. So
But yeah, it's a lot of color.
yeah. So something that
That's
I find
basically-
interesting about this piece is that the eyeballs or the pupils don't exist. So it's all basically the iris color, but there is kind of this heavy shading on it on the upper half of, I think, all of the eyes. And again, it's like really saturated, but it's an interesting style choice not to have the black pupils in there.
Yeah.
So much color.
I know.
Yeah. But again, it's like a deeper kind of saturation and in a way that makes it more tolerable for me as someone who's more visually inclined.
See, what I find odd is that this piece hits me and like is harder for me to look at than the Mew Ball's Twilight piece. Like as I kind of drift from color to color and look at different interactions, it's like it's almost harder for me to focus on than the Mew Ball one was. And I find that interesting because I wouldn't have expected that.
And I mean, it's that's why it's really important for me to separate the difference between saturation and lightness, because, you know, there are definitely, it's not like I'm looking at pieces like Mew Balls and going, oh, it's so saturated, that's why I hate it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I first of all, I don't hate it, so that's a bit extreme. But, you know, like the reason why I don't like it more than other ones is probably due to the combination of saturation and lightness in it. Because I look at a piece like this, which is arguably the same amount of saturation, and it is much more visually appealing to me personally because it has this lower lightness value. So, I mean, you know, you have to separate those two in your mind, because you can play around with these things in any combination and it'll completely change the piece.
Yeah. That is a good point, that when you're working on a piece that is highly saturated, you can work in different, I guess, ranges of value. So like the Mew Ball piece is kind of, well, the outlines are kind of in the lower, I guess, the lower end of the value spectrum. And
say what now? I wasn't.
yeah,
saying.
I'm looking for validation from Burn.
What do you mean?
Well, I wasn't. I was killing the value.
Okay.
What did you say?
In the Mew Ball piece, the
Yes.
outlines have a low value,
Click, click, click.
right?
The outlines in Mew Ball's
Yeah.
piece.
Like in the main and stuff, because it's darker.
A low value mean they're dark.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
Right.
and then
With the exception of yes and no. The blue has some low value, and there's some muted colors because in Mew Ball's piece it's unique because there's color being thrown over like dark things, and they blend to create, technically, since it's a subtractive color wheel, a darker value because you have more colors.
right.
But in areas like her hair next to her horn, like that's a really friggin' bright saturated red, you know what I mean?
Right.
But then
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
darker values in some of the outlines.
Yeah.
But your point being,
Well, just that, you know, when you're working in these really saturated pieces, that you can select values or ranges of values that kind of define your piece in a different way. So like the Kelsey Chan piece is using kind of like a lower range of values, although not necessarily, because rarity is also, you know, very white and bright and stuff like that. But yeah, all things come together to define the piece. So
yeah, no, what's interesting is like the uses of colors in this Kelsey Chen piece we're looking at right now, like the value of said saturated colors is still, it's very dark in comparison to others, like the Mew Ball piece or even the piece by Kelsey Chen that we featured before this. Like the value in the Kelsey Chen piece before this, all of the colors, they're extremely saturated and extremely bright and vivid, but the value on it, like when you kill all the colors, it's like super gray tone. It's like it's more than 50% gray, like it's lighter. It's extremely light. But in the piece we're looking at right now by Kelsey Chan, the Bring Back the Magic, it like when you take away all the color, it is much darker. There are a lot of deep shades of gray and deep shades of color. Very specifically in some of the outline areas and the hair shadows, which I find really awesome in the style, which I'll get into in a moment. And then like Rarity's hair, and then obviously in their eyes, those are a very deep like shade, and then the background as well. So like there's many deep shades of color or darker shades of color, or have you. But then there's really bright areas, which is like obviously the colors of all the characters are a very bright, lighter saturation of color. But then probably my favorite part is what I just mentioned, the shadows in the hair. So like if you look at Rainbow Dash, like the shadows on her mane and tail, do you see how the shadow created from Applejack, when it hits her tail, is like it just cuts off all the color? It just turns into like this like reddish brown. I thought that was really awesome, where the artist was like, when this shadow hits this tail, is just no more color. It's gonna cut it off. And the same happens in Twilight's tail as well. If you look at it, her tail's still extending. It's not all short and stubby, but her shadow is it's cutting off the color, which creates even more crazy lines to intersect and contrast stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, so we do have to kind of wrap up because we are running short on time. So, but yeah, cuteness.
Okay. Somebody say something.
Cuteness.
Goodness. Yeah, that one.
Go.
Okay. All right. What kind of mood or tone do you like most when looking for a piece? For example, calm, action, mystery, fear, etc. Sent in by Raingear, who made some amazing fan art for me this week. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ranger. You're amazing.
I always get into arguments with people because no one has the same definition of epic, but I have a definition in my head, and I'm going to use it. So epic. And the way that I'm going to describe it is if you go back a couple of weeks to the Octavia episode where we featured a Fox and Shadow piece, which I will put up on the screen with Octavia standing, and there's like lava going everywhere, and it's like it's kind of skewed, and I don't know. It looked epic. That's my version of epic. That's what I like to see the most.
Mm-hmm.
Epic, dramatic.
Yes,
Is
dramatic
there kind of
is
a
good word,
crossover
too.
with dramatic?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what because I felt like that piece was very dramatic.
Yes,
Dramatic.
yes.
Yes.
Kind of,
Diagonals.
yes. Not exactly, but yes, it's an aspect.
Yes.
I am pretty much the same way. I have a piece of art on my cycling on my desktop background, which is it's like a girl who's winged and like it's like there's a ton of motion in it. I can't remember exactly where I found it, but like I really enjoy that piece because there's all these diagonals and sweeping motions and stuff like that. I'll send you the picture.
Thank you.
Okay, one of my favorites is action stuff. You know me, I'm a big sucker for like force perspective, which is mainly done through action. Like in action sort of things where you can see something flying or like something's dropped or whatever. So that's one of my favorites, but that's not to say that I don't like everything else as well. Like even if I have a least favorite, there's always going to be that one exception that I love of that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes epicness or action is too busy for me. Like I still love a lot of pieces like that, obviously. Like when I think of epic, I think of Zyamo 5 is the artist that comes to mind. And I love a lot of his pieces for different reasons, but a lot of times stuff like that's really epically actionated gets just too, I don't know, busy for me. Calm, mystery, fear. I'm not actually sure what I most like. I kind of like the really like I don't know, interesting pieces to me. Like when I look at them and it's like they do something kind of crazy or weird or color aspect or stuff that's I don't know, different than the norm.
Well, I think different is a good word, you know, just something that does something a little bit differently from the norm.
Yeah. Because I'm like, I don't know what would be my favorite anymore because like I have over 160 pages of favorites and I kind of lose track.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. And, I don't know. Maybe I like inquisitive tones or notions. Just different, interesting, I guess, tones. I like different or interesting tones.
Yeah.
I'll go with
That
that.
makes sense.
Okay, so we'll have a question. We'll have our answers. Next question. Have you ever been so upset with one of your artworks that you decided to delete it or destroy it? If yes, do you regret it? Sent in by Anonymous. So, if I remember correctly, it was somebody who sent in like an actual name. Send us like a, I don't know, screen name, or if you don't have like a DeviantArt user, just make something up on the spot, just so we don't say your name.
Or let us specifically know we can say your like first name or something.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to if we're not given permission.
We're not making assumptions.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I'm not an artist anymore. Haven't been for a while. But I don't know. Part of it was just I got frustrated with traditional art because I'm no good at it. And that doesn't mean I couldn't learn or anything like that. I just didn't have the time, which is the reason why I'm not an artist anymore. But yeah, I have many pieces where I had a good idea, but I just didn't have the necessary skills at the time to make it look good. So I'd start it and then go, this looks awful, and then not finish it. That was almost every single piece of traditional art that I did was like that. So yes, I've had that.
There isn't any art that I've wanted to destroy or like scrap. There's a lot of art that I started but never finished and never like released. But the first piece that I ever made was it was a vector of Twilight, and I did go back and change it, like fix some stuff up, but no, I haven't really scrapped anything.
I'm the same. You can, if you really want to laugh, go back and look through all of my old DeviantArt stuff, because it's all in there, all my old stuff. I've also got a lot of old stuff that I haven't finished, or I've just like lost interest in, and it's just sitting in my to be completed folder at the moment. So they may eventually get done, but maybe not. I'm a big believer of, even if you don't like it, finish it anyway, because you'll probably learn something from it. So even if you don't like it, it might be something that you tried on that you think, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't like the thing overall, but I like that little one thing, so I can do that next time.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I've made a lot of traditional stuff for school, but I've never like made something or put enough effort into something where it's like I'd hate it enough to destroy it. That being said, there are 2 pieces I did in painting 1 that I absolutely hate and would never show anyone ever, but I have, and they're just sitting over there in the corner of my room. And if ever I needed canvases, I would totally paint them back over so I can reuse them, because I will never show them to anyone. I'm too lazy to throw them in the garbage, and I could also reuse the canvases. So someday I'll probably destroy those. But in drawing and stuff, it's just too easy to like archive stuff, and they're quick drawings that you learn from, so I wouldn't want to destroy it. Also recently, I did an abstraction painting for an assignment in painting 2, and I did not like the final outcome. So I was thinking of cannibalizing it or painting it back over like completely black, or like reusing the canvas or something. But then my teacher really liked it and had a lot of compliments for it. So maybe I won't. I don't know. But I don't have any regrets so far. And I would not regret destroying the 2 pieces that I hate. So
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's the questions. And yeah, I guess that's basically anything. Do you want to run through the plugs really quick, Atmospark?
I can do that. Okay, so we have a DeviantArt page, cutieartcrusaders.deviantart.com, Facebook Cutie Art Crusaders, Twitter @CutieArtCrusade, and an email address which is cutieartcrusaders@gmail.com. Got a bunch of questions this week, which is kind of cool. Well, actually, pretty cool.
Thank you, guys.
Also, a few people be sending in art suggestions for like when we announce the themes and stuff. We do look at those. So sometimes they don't fit exactly, or we find stuff that we sort of think fits a little better, but we do look at them.
Yep.
Cool.
yeah, I mean, people have been even suggesting episodes and like giving lists and stuff, and like we look at them as well.
That's cool. Yeah.
We reserve the right to.
So speaking of episodes, our theme is going to be right here. Yay! Yay, theme!
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And there's a spoiler cast after this.
Yes. And there's a spoiler cast after this.
Yeah.
So, stick around for that if you want. Otherwise, this is the end of the episode. So, thank you guys for watching, whether or not you're on the live stream or on YouTube. We love you all the same. My name is Rainbow Plasma.
My name's Bernd.
I'm FlutterGuy317.
I'm Atmospark.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye!
Bye.
Hello, and welcome to the 15th spoiler cast of My Little Pony Season 4, done by the Cutie Art Crusaders. My name is FlutterGuy317, and today I am joined by Rainbow Plasma.
Hello, everybody.
And Burned01.
Hello.
And Atmospark.
Hello.
And today we're going to be spoiler casting Season 4, Episode 16, It Ain't Easy Being Breezies. And the reason that my fellow cast is talking in accents is because the Breezies, who are so adorable, talked in accents. So...
What are you talking about?
We ain't talking funny.
They are speaking in our normal accents.
You don't sound Canadian anymore. It's weird.
This is the traditional Canadian accent.
Is it Indian there?
Sorry.
Just a little bit.
Went a little bit Indian there. Not quite.
So we were trying to figure out before we started the spoiler cast what accent that closely mimics. And
Swedish.
we kind of figured Swedish / Gaelic /
It's like super Swedish. Like
yeah,
like people. It's like super stereotypical.
it's
Swedish.
stereotypical Swedish.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not actually like Swedish. Like I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that there aren't, however many million people in Sweden walking around talking like that.
It reminded me of there's an Animaniacs episode where they're in Sweden and Wacko is at a Swedish meatball eating contest, and everyone was talking with basically the same accent that we heard today.
And then they went to Canada and rode a moose and talked to Mounties because apparently they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yay, country stereotypes.
Yeah.
Well, it was the
So
same.
anyhow.
It's the same when people come to Australia. Like, everyone expects there to be kangaroos and koalas everywhere, but they're really not. And then, relevant Andrew Libman came to Australia for PonyCon AU, and the first thing she did was see a koala in a tree.
So they are
Where's-
there.
Where's
Yeah.
your Barbie? I heard you put shrimp on it.
That is the biggest stereotype.
Yeah, or Foster's.
Yeah, Foster's.
Pretty sure as soon as
How
you
do you
step off,
protect your babies from dingoes?
I'm pretty sure as soon as you step off the plane in Australia, they're like, "Good day, mate. Welcome to Australia. Here's your complimentary koala."
Except they say
So-
it using a bunch of words that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, when you came to this country, you gave me a koala. That doesn't
Yeah,
help
true,
with
I have a
stereotypes.
I have 2 koalas right here. I'm gonna make them do a little dance for me only because you guys won't be able to see this. But
I have one climbing on my microphone,
I mean-
so there.
They can dance if they want to.
Can leave your friend behind.
No, don't drop your boomerang. Don't drop your boomerang.
We had to
Pick
work it in
back up.
somehow.
Moving
There we go.
forwards.
So anyhow, about this episode, so we start out and Fluttershy is talking to the main 6 about cheering for the Breezies as they come through, which is interesting because in an earlier episode this season, Fluttershy went to go visit the Breezies, and we actually saw that. I can't remember what episode number it was, but it was the episode
Come on,
where...
it's Discord.
Continuity.
Hmm?
The one with Discord.
Yeah,
that
the one with
episode.
Discord. And because she got on the train and Pinkie Pie
Yes.
chased after her, and, yeah, et cetera, et cetera.
The continuity. Bernard already
Yeah.
said that, but I wanted to say it too.
It's good.
You wanted to
It
feel
gets the
included.
point across.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting because Fluttershy is teaching the main 6 to cheer quietly.
Yeah, it was the opposite of season 1 episode Sonic Rainboom.
Yeah.
Where
The irony.
It was a little funny. That was a little funny little throwback there.
Toss
I thought
back,
this
yeah.
episode was actually really well written. Just starting
Mhm.
off with, the last couple of ones have been a lot of
Thanks,
fun.
Megan
And,
McCarthy.
we're really good. And we've seen 2 Fluttershy episodes like not back to back, right? What was last week's again?
Yeah.
It was back to back.
back to back, yeah.
Yeah, so we've seen 2 Fluttershy episodes back to back, which is good because I singled her out as the one pony that had no episodes and was really being ignored most of the season. So obviously they just stacked him near the back.
Well, I mean, we still have, 11 episodes? No, 10 episodes to go?
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really nice to see that back to back. And we kind of expected the last episode, which was the singing one, to be her key episode, but it turned out that this episode was her key
I
episode.
didn't expect it. I wouldn't
Well, no.
have been surprised.
That's
but yeah,
fair,
this one's her key episode. And I
Yeah.
still have people coming up to me being like, "Dude, I have this theory. I think that this was going to be your key episode." And I'm like, "I know. I totally called it."
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I like that
But yeah.
they did the sort of kindness key really, really well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I
they
didn't
definitely-
expect something it's obviously going to be I'm too kind and etc. But the way that they did it in this case was really, really well done.
Yeah, definitely. And they also made it so that I don't know, maybe this isn't quite accurate, but they made her realize her key without showing the key itself. It was more like she realized a lesson and then later was given something that became the key.
Yeah.
Well,
she
that's
did
the
see
same
the
kind of
rainbow
thing
path.
with. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a really good lesson. It was a combo. So there's two things that happened. She taught the Breezies how to be nice, right? She taught Seabreeze how to show a little bit of kindness, but she also learned herself that kindness isn't always the be all end all. And I think that's really important because it shows this dual message of like,
That's so good.
you can be kind and you should try to be, but you have to realize that you can't, that Fluttershy can't just be her element and that's it. She can't be one dimensional and she can't be this, doormat. And she has to learn that kindness isn't everything. And sometimes you just have to put your foot down or hoof down and, be firm with people.
It's like raising
And
kids.
I think that's the best. I think that's the best way to do it. These kind of things.
Yeah. Well, and this is interesting because like a lot of people, mostly on Reddit, will say that, oh, this is the same kind of lesson that we've learned before with Fluttershy and whatnot. But like in last week's episode, the whole baby steps thing came up, and it's like, yeah, something like that requires baby steps. And in this episode, it's a little bit different because like they did need her help for a time, and so she did show them kindness, and like she wanted to help them, but then they kind of took advantage of that, and like it's kind of like the Rarity episode where she took advantage of her generosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a completely different kind of thing, but like fairly similar.
I'm so sick and tired of hearing people talk about how Fluttershy always learns the same lessons over and over and over again, because those people obviously haven't had any issues like she has. Like shyness, fears, all these things don't go away by just suddenly realizing that they're wrong or silly or something.
I have had a
That's not
revelation and
what
I'll never
works.
have this problem for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some stuff works like that, okay? There are certain like facts. You'll learn a fact and you'll be like, oh, well, I was wrong before. Now this is a fact. I know this is right. No problem. I can change that. There's certain things, and we've shown that in the show where sometimes they'll be like, oh, I just didn't know this fact. Now I do. We're all good now. We can move forward, right? But this is not just some sort of fact that she needs to learn. She knows this, but it's a fear. It's an insecurity. It's a weakness of her. And anybody who's had to battle their own weaknesses and insecurities knows that it is sometimes a lifelong process. And so these things, that's why last week I mentioned the baby steps things was perfect, because that's exactly what needs to happen. It's baby steps. It happens over time. It's like the writers were saying, look, guys, we know it's the same lessons that Fluttershy is always doing, but she's making slow progress. That's what has to happen. And she's a great character for people out there who are making this slow progress and who look at this and go, oh, look, all these people are improving themselves. They need a character who's making this slow progress, who's showing them that you don't always have to have some sort of huge dramatic reveal where everything is suddenly okay again.
Yeah, and it's the writers do a great job in like the fact that they introduce kind of variants on that whole theme. She is making slow progress and whatnot, and they are similar lessons, but like there's enough of a twist on it that it's not like the same exact thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. But anyhow, back to this episode. So the Breezies kind of come through, and they apparently, it looks like they can't actually flap their wings, at least that hard.
It looks like they just
So they have to like
catch the wind with it.
Yeah, they're like sails on the wind or something like that. So the Pegasi have to generate a breeze to get them moving and stuff, which is interesting.
I really like the way that they handled that one character. His name was Seabreeze. I really like the way they handled him because he was this like big aggressive person, but the more you learned about him, the more you kind of understood his point of view.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you're like, whoa, a bit aggressive there, tiny little bud.
Yeah, they even have that part.
Yeah, but then, they eventually you do get to see his point of view. And I think it's important because as an emotional, loud-spoken kind of guy, sometimes we can really come off as jerks. But that doesn't mean that we're always jerks, and it doesn't mean that we don't have a valid point of view. So it was nice to see that, and it was nice to see him learn that kind of lesson at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that whole like, Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I will admit with the voice modifications, I couldn't tell that was male at first until somebody started saying he.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that'll
that's the
happen.
point.
Yeah. I don't think there was any body difference between. Yeah. So it didn't really. You couldn't tell. But
Yeah, it
speaking
didn't
of
matter.
like appearances, those breezies are so cute.
I like
already
the
seen
main
people
six
making
breezes
breezes.
most.
Yeah, the main 6 breezies.
I
So
was
cute.
trying to see all the small ones in the beginning, and it was really hard to see, but they looked like a bunch of them were like tossed back just to ponies. I think I even saw like there was one, it looked like a Spitfire pony. It had like goggles and junk,
Well, that's
Yeah.
cute.
but it was so tiny, and even the 1080 resolution that I was watching wasn't the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was. Yeah, they were interesting, and it was nice to. It was nice that we got kind of like a closer view on them because at the beginning too, I was like, oh well, I don't even know what these look like, little fairy things.
Yeah.
But then we got up close and personal with a lot of them.
Yeah.
This is really
Well,
weird,
it's-
like Smurf tossback.
Yes. Oh my god, I got a huge Smurf vibe from it. Yeah, it's really interesting because like ponies are adorable partially because of their huge eyes, and if you look at breezies, like their eyes are even bigger than ponies in
They're like
comparison to their
70% eye.
yeah.
Yeah.
So ginormous eyes equals ginormous cuteness factor. But I did like when the main 6 became the breezies, how they like their manes became like ridiculously long.
Flowing
It's
in the breeze.
Yeah, so over the top.
Yeah, it's great.
Especially Rainbow Dashes.
Jeez. Yeah.
But,
I wanted to bring up the point because I've been kind of negative on Pinkie Pie the last like month or so. I thought that she was really good in this episode.
Mhm.
I thought that the way that she was handled and the way that her character was kind of done was really good in this episode. Like it conveyed her personality without just making her like a joke.
Yeah,
That was good.
no, I agree. As someone who actually has been liking Pinkie Pie more in season 4 than in the previous seasons, I do agree that with the last episode it was kind of a little over the top, but like, they definitely kind of toned it down this episode, and she was very, I guess, moderated in terms of her enthusiasm, but it was still there, so it was nice.
I was
totally
expecting
thought-
it to explode from confetti.
Yeah, I was expecting
Yeah.
when she was like gonna explode, that leaf was gonna like fall, like float down and hit Pinkie Pie, and then she was gonna like, and like confetti was gonna go everywhere.
Yeah, kind of like Fluttershy with the leaf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I
100%.
just remembered last week wasn't Fluttershy. Last week was CMC.
Oh, that's right. So 2 weeks ago.
With Twilight,
Sorry.
yes.
Scratch everything that we've been saying.
Everybody in the chat has already told us how much of an idiot we are. We realized it, I swear.
Just now.
Just have to be patient, keep watching, have faith.
So but I don't know. This episode, it didn't really have that much to it. Was the strange thing. Like it took place in like 3 locations.
Yeah.
You know, like it started with the breezies coming through town, and then it went straight to Fluttershy's like cottage, stayed there for the most of it, and then ended up on the journey back to the breezy's home.
Mm-hmm.
Their journey in the breezy home was kind of pretty though, like that whole.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it
that
was
was-
really cool. I like that a lot.
It reminds me of the whole rainbow, like underneath, what is it, Cloudsdale? Like the
Rainbow
whole
Falls?
shimmeringness. Yeah.
It was really interesting.
Yeah. I love the little quips that the main 6 had when they entered, like Rarity with the, I should have brought my sketchbook, like something like that.
Also,
Yeah.
besides Smurf tossbacks, what are those? They're like, it was a show I never watched because I think it was before my time, but it was like these little animal or weird colored people like things that were super small, and they like, it was this cartoon or something, and they basically like lived in like a city or something underneath like people. You know what I'm talking about? The only reason I
Island
know
Lucy.
they exist is because I see them make fun of it on Robot Chicken.
Fraggle Rock?
Yes, that.
Yeah.
What is, like, tell me about that.
Three's Company.
Fraggle Fraggle Rock was a show, and I think it was a Muppet style show.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it. I don't remember much about it though.
It was like when
But
there was
I remember it was good.
small creatures that lived in like this secret little town thing or like
Yeah.
city. I totally like thought of that. Maybe
Yeah.
more prospects.
And it was underneath underneath like this guy's house, and like he didn't know about them, but his like dog did or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, his dog did. There's also
Yeah.
I really like the little Easter egg with the Doctor Hooves. Yeah, Doctor.
Yes. Oh my god, that was fantastic.
With 3D sunglasses, like because like that was completely unnecessary, and there was no reason for them to be there other than being a little Easter egg toss back.
Yeah.
Not toss back, wrong term. I just like that word.
Yeah.
Toss.
No, that was fantastic. I didn't even notice it. And then I was looking at some Reddit thread, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's a great connection thing that they just kind of threw in there, because he was wearing 3D glasses and he was with Roseluck, which if anyone who's
there was
watched Doctor
no
Who, it's
godly purpose for them to be there.
yeah.
Like it wasn't relevant in the episode at all. It was just, hey, he's wearing 3D glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. The little things like just kind of make these episodes like that. Something else that I really enjoyed is like when they first go to Fluttershy's cottage thing. It's like showing how all of her animals are kind of displaced. And it's just like the little touches, like the birds are no longer in their house because the breezes have taken over, and like Angel got kicked out of his bed, so he's like all grumpy.
Suck it, Angel.
Good. He deserves it.
Yeah.
I thought that they might go a direction this episode where they reveal where like the breezies are like actually horrible things, kind of like the way that they did with the Parasprites, where they're like, oh, they're so cute, and then they destroyed everything.
I was thinking
thought-
that as well, like when I went back to the homeworld.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that they might, like, oh, we need to help them, and they're so nice and they're so cute and whatever. And then when they actually spend more than 5 seconds just looking at them, they actually realize that they're crazy, and they take over everything. But it didn't seem to work out that way. They're just lazy.
Yeah. Well, they were glomming on Fluttershy's kindness like hardcore.
Yeah.
I mean,
can I mention the fact that at some point, Seabreeze goes out to try and catch the breeze by himself, and Fluttershy's like, "Oh, where did he go?" And then she looks left, and then she looks right, and then she looks under her hoof.
yeah.
that was
great.
That was so. I don't even know.
That was
It's
so
like the
subtle, I
best-
didn't even notice.
Yeah, it's the best subtle gag. I burst out laughing the first time I saw it because it was an amazing subtle gag.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's
man.
hilarious. I didn't even notice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't even say anything about it. They mentioned earlier, "Oops, careful, because you
Yeah,
could
when
step
like,
on them."
Applejack almost stepped on one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they didn't say anything about it. It was perfect. That's comedy. Love it.
Yeah, that was really good. Also, Fluttershy in a bee suit.
Let's not talk about that.
That was interesting.
It was a bit weird.
It's like
Yeah.
we don't talk about Leo Pony.
Oh yeah. No.
Oh no, we talk about Leo Pony all day. You wanna go on? I hear it made an appearance. I hear it made an appearance. I wish it made an appearance in this episode. You're right. Anyways,
Yeah. So
good episode. I liked it.
yeah, so the Breezes get back home, and it turns out that Seabreeze has a family that he had to get back to, so it was like so heartwarming in the end.
The whole
Yeah.
ending was like,
Yeah, and then you like get justification for him being a jerk at the beginning because
Just
it's
wanted
like,
to see his family.
yeah, he had a
was just
kid and
worried.
a wife and
Exactly.
a home.
but he learned an important lesson about being a parent.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we've seen 4 keys now: Rarity,
Mhm.
Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash, and Pinkie Pie. And it's been 16 episodes, so that means that we should be seeing one around 20 and one around 24 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I suspect that, well, first of all, Twilight's will be the last one. That's guaranteed. I mean, like, there's no
Oh yeah.
there's no question there. That's just, there's no reason why they wouldn't put that last. But I also think that they might put her key like in the final episode. Like there'll be a situation. Like here's my prediction, and I'm gonna see if this will come true or not. So you can quote me on this. But my prediction is this: we'll get down to the last episode, whether or not it's a 1-parter or 2-parter or whatever, But it'll be like the last quote unquote episode, and a situation will come up where they need the elements of harmony, but they don't have them. Oh no! So then they're like, well, we've got this box, and basically something happens. They have the 5 keys and they need the 6th, and it's going crazy. And then at the last second, Twilight will find her key, and then it'll unlock, and they'll be able to defeat the evil that happened to.
Spoilers.
Are we doing r/My Level Conspiracies now? Or?
That was significantly less detailed than I probably wanted to be, but you know what I mean. We'll have 5 keys. We'll get the 6th one. It'll solve the problem.
Yeah. See, I'm taking a different approach. I'm thinking that they'll have the 6 keys, but they don't know what to do with them, or that they're keys at all, because they're these objects, and the finale will be them figuring out that they are the keys. Or something
My
like that.
goodness, we had it
Well,
all
I
the
mean,
time.
that would be an aspect of it. I think the difference is I think that she'll get her last key like in the nick of time, and you think that she'll get it before, and the episode will be all about figuring it out.
Yeah.
Interesting. It could go either way, I think.
We'll see. No idea. But yeah, so unfortunately we do have to kind of wrap this up because we are running short on time. But I think we all enjoyed this episode. It was fun. So thank you guys for watching this spoiler cast, and come back next week for Cutie Art Crusaders and for another spoiler cast for episode 17 of season 4.
We'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.
Love you.
Heard and heard and spoken.
I'm during my week off at Flutterguy's place, so thanks again for having me, bud.
No problem. I just, like, while you were talking about that, I had this mental image of you, like, heading home to Canada, riding a moose with a Canadian flag and, like, maple syrup and, like, just, like, really epic style.
Well, it was actually, like, the border was super easy because the Canada versus Sweden gold medal hockey game was on early in the morning, which, of course, I got up for.
Yeah.
And we won. Woo!
Yay.
But the border was super quick, and when I got there, the person in the booth who was I don't know if they're Canadian or American, but they had like a sports recap of the day, and they were showing the gold medal game, and I kind of like chatted them up about it. So that was
nice.
It was pretty Canadian. Going back with
How to get into Canada.
Just talk about hockey.
Who won the hockey game today? Oh, but there were so many. That's the right answer.
You passed. Go ahead.
You have to add like an A in there at the end.
It's funny that we're mentioning hockey because this week's episode is 87. 87 is the number of a very good hockey player, Sidney Crosby. No one else will care about that. I thought it was a funny coincidence. Let's move on.
I
had no
know
idea.
that name, actually. It's weird. I don't follow hockey at all, but I know that name.
I've already forgotten his name.
Captain of Team Canada.
Yeah. So yeah, you're back in Canada.
One of the activities that we did together was watching Twitch plays Pokemon. While we were there, kind of watching that whole thing unfold. So for people who weren't aware, which is surprising to me, there was this new Twitch channel that came up that basically was playing the old Pokemon games, Pokemon Red, I believe.
Yeah.
Either Red or Blue. And basically you could type a command into the chat and the game would register it and do it, which sounds great except for the fact that there's 100,000 people doing it at once. So it's kind of random.
Mhm.
And today, I guess early this morning on the Friday, March the 1st, they actually beat the game.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Saturday. when we're
March the
talking about
1st.
Saturday, March the 1st.
Yeah.
They actually beat the game.
Yeah.
So now they're going to be starting a new game. That's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
as a gaming enthusiast, it was really cool to see the fact that they actually beat the game just by perseverance.
Yeah. And it took a lot. It was a lot quicker than I had originally thought it would be. Because like you were explaining, I lived a sad childhood and never played Pokemon.
Right.
But you were explaining like how they have to beat the final bosses and stuff, and it was like, oh well, that's not gonna happen for a long time.
Well, it wasn't the final bosses that was hard. It was getting to them.
Yeah.
The second they got to them, they'd won the game.
Yeah.
Because that's just a grind. So as long as they could get one Pokemon, they'd be able to. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. So that was something, and I know a lot of our fans have watched it as well,
Mhm.
and a lot of people in general have watched it. So that's a cool thing There should be some sort of pony version of that.
Hey, what, like a Twitch plays, what are those games on the
Fighting is
hub?
magic.
Oh, hey now.
Hey.
That doesn't exist. I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
careful, we'll get a C&D.
Also, if you hear a dog barking in the background, I've got new neighbors. They have a dog. It barks.
As they usually do.
Well, if you hear jingling of a collar, that's my dog moving positions because he's sleeping.
If you hear jingling of keys, that's my mouse. And
If you hear Flutter Guy talk, it means he's going to transition to the art.
And if you hear snoring, that's just Atmo.
Well, I'm not snoring.
Oh.
Snoring at all.
So,
Go eat an apple, Burn. Hey, Burn. Why don't you type some notes on your keyboard that nobody can hear ever?
Wow.
Don't make fun of my keyboard.
anyhow, all right. So this week's theme is bright freaking colors, apparently.
Yeah.
It's saturation. That's the technical term.
Well, not according to what Byrne put on his on the stream.
yeah,
It was
well,
bright freaking colors with like what 8 E's.
we don't always follow Burns' lead.
So that means basically like heavy saturation and use of really bright colors, but good use of really bright colors.
I didn't want the color like theme to be specifically just saturation. I want it to be like super bright.
Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Cutie Art Crusaders for March 4th, 2014. My name is Rainbow Plasma. I'm the organizer and this week's editor, and today I'm joined by...
Burn to One, the special guest coordinator.
I'm Flutterguy317. I am the media manager.
And I'm Atmo Spark. I do the questions and stuff. I'm back. Yay.
Yay!
Hooray.
Yay! You lost your voice last
I
weekend.
did.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody almost missed me.
Well, you were back for the spoiler cast, so they like
Yeah.
they only had.
It was like you were never gone.
Speaking of being back, it's funny because it's been almost like a week now, so I've almost not forgotten about it, but it's old news to me. But based on, since last week, I'm obviously back in Canada. Shortly after I recorded the podcast on Friday and the spoiler cast on Saturday, I drove back on Sunday. So I guess I don't know. I don't really like talking about the trip while I'm there, but it's nice that I can talk about it now, kind of now that I'm back. So yeah, I had a fun, relaxing time.
I still have my mouse that. So last night Rainbow Plasma has kind of gotten me into playing Hearthstone, which is a new game
Damn right.
from Blizzard. And it's amazing. And we were playing it last night, and all of a sudden I heard like the jangling of keys downstairs, and I live alone, so that was kind of freaky. And turns out I have a mouse that I need to capture now. So he scared the living daylights out of me though.
Yeah. There's someone in your house.
I know.
He's messing with your keys.
Well, because I had made crepes, and like to make crepes, I whisk flour with a fork, and then like I'll put it into a bowl that I had used to melt butter, and apparently the mouse got into the bowl, like
Had a grand old time.
yeah, because there was like
rolling around
residue
in
of butter, and like apparently somehow my fork ended up like halfway across my countertop. So
That was a big mouse.
yeah, I don't really know what he was doing.
I'm taking this with me.
At least they didn't take it as like a weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna wake up in the middle of the night and have a fork in your face.
Just a mouse with a fork. Yeah, so that kind of scared me yesterday, but I'm back. I'm better now.
And also, speaking of stuff that happened while I was at your place, one of the